welcome to this Chamber webinar, which is going to be discussing the importance of Black-owned businesses on the local and indeed the national economy. And this sort of forms part of a whole range of activity and support that the Chamber is putting really ostensibly around Black Pound Day, which of course was an initiative launched over the summer to help promote Black-owned businesses to sort of raise their profile and ultimately to also raise their sales in the wake of the terrible murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. If you don't know about Black Pound Day, we will touch on it a little bit later, but it's focused on the first Saturday of every month, and so do circle the 3rd of October, Saturday the 3rd of October as the next Black Pound Day. So this morning we're going to have this conversation. I'm delighted that we are joined by a fantastic panel who I'll just introduce to you all, although I'm sure everyone is going to be well known to the audience. We've got Professor Mondaram, Director of CREM at Aston Business School, CREM being the Centre for Research in Ethnic Minority Entrepreneurship. Also, Councillor Sharon Thompson. Sharon's been a council member, I believe, since 2014, and currently is a cabinet member for Homes and Neighbourhood, and was played an absolute pivotal role in bringing Black Pound Day to Birmingham and making sure it wasn't just a London-focused initiative. And then last, but certainly by no means least, Joel Blake. Joel wears many hats, including being the CEO and founder of GFA Exchange, a fintech business, which it helps to reduce risks and costs for financial services firms. And also, as of yesterday, Joel is now the president of the Greater Birmingham Commonwealth Chamber of Commerce, which is one of the divisions here at the broader Greater Birmingham Chamber. So we've got a really strong panel. And the format for the morning is we're going to hear from everybody and their own particular take on part of this topic. It's very much meant to be an interactive session, so please do put questions and thoughts in the chat bar, and what we'll try to do is to bring those into the conversation. We've got 45 minutes scheduled for this today, so they're very mindful it's a short period of time for what is a massive topic, but we wanted to still make this time, start the conversation really. And I know that certainly the commitment from the Chamber is that this is about ongoing engagement, ongoing participation in the wider conversation. And if there are particular takeaways from this morning, then I know that the Chamber and indeed I'm sure the panelists will all pick up and follow up on those. So let's get stuck into things then. And Monda, I was going to come to you to open up the conversation really. And I suppose, just set the scene somewhat. What does your work and wider research tell us about the importance of Black-owned businesses to the economy?
Well, morning, Paul. Let me just first say how pleased I am that Chambers running this event. I think this signifies a really important point in time that mainstream institutions are taking this very seriously and it's on their agenda. And while I'm sort of expressing gratitude, let me say how pleased I am that Joel Blake's taken over from the presidency, the right man at the right time. So I'm delighted that there's real momentum behind this in this great city. Now, I've got the pleasure of working at the Centre for Research in Ethnic Minority Entrepreneurship. We do research on minority enterprise, and we've been looking at Black enterprise specifically for about 25 years. I'm not going to run through that, but I'm just going to mention a few highlights of a very recent survey that we've done at the centre with our partners, the Enterprise Research Centre for the Federation of Small Businesses. We've just done the largest ever study of ethnic minority enterprise in the UK. And I'll just sort of mention a few facts and figures and maybe pick up a few themes that we might pick up on. What we found is that there are around 250,000 ethnic minority businesses in the UK out of a total of 5.5 million. I have to say, I think this figure is an underestimate, but we'll maybe move on to that a bit later. Out of that 250,000, around 40,000 are Black owned, which is about 0.7 of the SME population, and the Afro-Caribbean population in the UK is around 3.3. So it's a significant part of the ethnic minority business population. The important point to note is that it's growing. So 10, 20 years ago, the big theme was, in terms of African Caribbean self-employment, was that it tended to be lower than average, almost half. But over the last 10 years, it's almost on a par now. So there's been significant growth in the African Caribbean self-employment population. Right, a few other facts and figures that might be worth noting, and these apply to ethnic minority businesses per se. The report is really huge and extensive. There's a lot into it. 2 or 3 findings that I find particularly interesting, and I think should be on the agenda for this debate, is the finding that ethnic minority businesses are more likely to be growth oriented than other firms. They're more likely to export, which given Joel's new role might be an important finding, and they're more likely to be innovative. Those are, we don't often talk about that, and for me, those kinds of findings set the agenda for what a new approach to minority entrepreneurship might look like. At the same time, we also find that ethnic minority businesses are more likely to utilize informal networks than formal networks, and that I think is an important consideration. So as we begin to think about what is the significance of these findings for policies, for organizations like the Chamber, those are some of the facts and figures that we might want to take into account. I think it's, I welcome the importance of initiatives like Black Pound Day. I think it sort of builds on a real tradition in the African Caribbean and the African American community of self-reliance and enterprise, which it's a story that's not told enough. It's been well established in the States for many years, and I think this initiative, and we've got great advocates on the call, and as well as sort of the great institutions in the city like the Legacy Centre, build on that, and it's important to see that as part of a number of different initiatives that work together to promote enterprise in diverse communities.
And Londa, do you were you able to identify key triggers or reasons for that growth in Black entrepreneurship in the past, say, 10 years, I think you were saying? Has there been particular things we go, that was a moment where things started to shift, or it was around sort of leadership or people sort of, what inspired that, or what has inspired that?
Well, it's difficult to isolate a particular factor, but I think it's probably worth noting that during that time, the level of self-employment in the population grew anyway. So more people, there's a bigger SME population during that period.
Off the back of the last financial crash, I suppose.
Well, that's right. So one of the most growth areas in the last decade, Paul, has been self-employment as a category of employment. So I think that's an important feature. It's difficult to say it's an initiative or a particular factor, but I think it's a combination of different factors.
Yeah. And it's also, just to draw out what's really striking for me there, where you sort of said that Black-owned businesses more likely to innovate, to be growth focused, and to export, because they're 3 of the absolute sort of key features that we look at here, and we're trying to promote constantly at the Chamber. In general, I mean, exporting is obviously, we've touched on Joel's role with the Commonwealth Chamber of Commerce, but we do a lot of work with DIT and just in general trying to promote the benefits of exporting, because if you export, your business is likely to be stronger, more sustainable, and there's so many opportunities out there. But that's again something which I suppose can be seen as being really a positive, which we need to tap into more, don't we?
That's an absolutely key point. It's a finding across minority groups, and it is something that, given in post-COVID, post-Brexit, where's the recovery going to come from? Quite rightly, it's going to come through international trade. One of the things I'd point out is when we think about export trade, global links, we think about big shiny new projects. Often this is sort of globalization from below. These are almost very small businesses taking advantage of their diasporic links to build trade. That's a story, Paul, I think we don't tell it enough. So we did a smaller study, qualitative study of new arrivals from different parts of Africa who had built their businesses in areas like Sparkhill, etc., etc. Those are not the kind of businesses one sort of thinks about when we think about international trade. But it's remarkable how many of them do have historic links.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about that. And yet they are reconfiguring, reimagining, and reviving those areas. Yeah. And I think this gives us a real opportunity to change the narrative of what we mean by diversity, entrepreneurship, and I think we're at a really important moment in time.
Yeah, and I suppose, you know, particularly pertinent here in Birmingham, where we're such a melting pot, aren't we? That actually should be naturally, I guess, then those diasporic links that you mentioned really extend all over the world, don't they?
Yeah, they do, and we're one of the most super diverse, as the academics say, super diverse cities in the UK, and we have those links. And I think we need to, I suppose, have a debate on, first of all, what we need to do to recognise that these links exist. Yeah. Where do they fit within our economy? To what extent are they represented in wider debates on the industrial strategy, on inclusive growth, and how can we leverage them? We really need to see them as a source of the city's competitive advantage.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And one of the challenges, isn't it, because too often they're not involved in the conversations or the discussions or the decisions enough, yet actually not only have so much to add, but would sort of broaden the thinking and the opportunities, which makes an awful lot of sense. Sharon, I wanted to just come to you, and I wanted to really get your take on Black Pound Day, and I suppose a little bit, you know, tell us your involvement, why you think it matters, and how you played that role in kicking it off in Birmingham, and I suppose also how it's been going from your perspective.
Right, and firstly, I just want to say thank you, Paul, for putting on this session this morning. It's great to be on such an esteemed panel with our colleagues, and it's a really important topic for me. I got involved with Black Pound Day. I think, like most consumers within the African Caribbean community, the first Black Pound Day I was a consumer, so I was advertising it myself. I'd heard about it online, so I wasn't involved in the infrastructure at that point. But I was spending money with Black-owned businesses on Black Pound Day, and it was more than for me than just talking about raising the profile and spending money with businesses. It was the fact that whilst we were seeing what was going on in America and the conversation it was bringing to the UK around discrimination, around inequalities, injustice, and whilst there was protests and other things taking place, this was about positive action. This was about actually contributing something differently and coming from the grassroots upwards. So Swiss, who's the founder of Black Pound Day, he's very much a grassroots person, although involved heavily within the music industry. And it was really about trying to even the level playing field, because we know that sometimes Black-owned businesses are less likely to be able to get a loan, tend to be the smaller business, the grassroots are kind of starting off, you know, making grannies, sourcing the house and things like that, and enterprising from knocking on doors. And this was about really exposing those businesses, but also looking at the different levels of networks within business, because anything that contributes towards the Black economy contributes towards the wider UK economy. And at a time when we were going to head into recession, this was really important. So I reached out to Swiss and said, you know, I want to hear a little bit more about your thinking. Where do you want to go with this? And he was very clear that he wanted this to be a UK-based national programme that went across. And I reached out to a few people. So Joel, Jamila Jamila Davis from the Chamber, and I was really touched actually the way that the council and also the Chamber came straight on board, because Birmingham has the second largest Black population in the country, so it made sense for us to do it. It would be rude not to, I think. So I was really excited about getting involved, and the first Black Pound Day that we did, we had huge endorsements from across the city and from different industries, but it exceeded our expectations, or at least my expectations, because as a consumer myself, it made me readdress some of my spending behaviours, not about specifically spending just with Black-owned businesses. It wasn't about boycotting, it's definitely not about that. But actually, it made me start researching online businesses that I didn't know of before. It made me start going to different products that I would never have heard of before. And it helped to give visibility to those groups that didn't have the marketing skills. So I think it's quite essential. And I know that having spoken to Swiss more recently, he's found it very beneficial. So the Black Pound Day, for the 2 Black Pound Days that it had so far, it generated, I think it was over almost £80,000 across the country in terms of revenue, which that's the minimum amount that they could calculate from the receipt. But for a starting point, for the first starting point, I think it was a good start. And this was something that he dreamed up 12 years ago. So he's very proud that it's got as far as it has. And it's also connected different parts of the diaspora. We're seeing so much more different from, people say the African Caribbean, forget that we've got such a wide diaspora out there. So I think that's been really good. And what's touched me the most is seeing how many new businesses started up at the last Black Pound Day. So I saw a 17-year-old have now put her grandmother's sauce packaged and everything, and is now selling in shops, and she's 17 years of age, and it's taking that step to actually launch into business. And as the economy changes and we start talking about skills and businesses, I think that this should be really an area, businesses should be an area that we're trying to utilise people's skills and get them into businesses across the board.
And how inspiring is that? You know, I mean, 17-year-old with the initiative and the ambition to go and do that. And it's a sort of attitude, isn't it, which we absolutely have to foster and encourage and sort of mentor along, because, you know, people sort of, you know, you're going to, and we know that you know, entrepreneurs, you tend to fail and fail and fail, but it's the carrying on is how you ultimately really strike gold. And I think it's great that something like Black Pound Day can be the trigger to just encourage people to step forward.
And I think it's also good to say that they was using a hashtag for social medias that was trending on Twitter, which meant that the visibility for different businesses was really, really strong. In Birmingham, the last Black Pound Day, there was the launch of the Black Pound Day market at the Legacy Centre, and obviously around restrictions, there was 43 businesses that were actually there. And throughout the day, they saw a footfall of almost 1,000 people. And many of those businesses who normally would be trading from home actually sold out of their products. So that was a really success story for the smaller business that were taking place within the city.
And great, again, that there's the sort of the entrepreneurship to be able to do that in person, you know, COVID safe. And I know that it was, but sort of in the current climate to still find a way. And Sharon, I mean, with Black Pound Day, what's the sort of the medium and longer term plan? And to say it's the first Saturday of every month, so we know that the 3rd of October is fast approaching. Can't believe that. And but you know, is this something which is going to sort of run and run and run, or what's your understanding around that?
So it's going to continue to run. We're going to continue to push it in Birmingham.
Yeah.
I know that the Black Pound Day team are currently in talks with Bristol Council, so they're looking at a rollout across Bristol of this magnitude and in other local authority areas, so we can get the kind of energy that they gave in Birmingham. And to be honest, they felt that we gave phenomenal amounts of energy in Birmingham, so they're not, you know, they want to see if that can be replicated. They've actually got some big marketing businesses on board to help them with the marketing aspects, and also looking at ambassadors across the country to help get the message out and promote. But it's very clear that it's not, this is just supposed to be a catalyst to open people's minds. It's not just about the first Saturday every month and you get to the second, you don't bother spending, but it's also about bringing the other initiatives in board. So encouraging people to sign up for programs that are happening locally, to sign up to the chamber, to get involved, and to also to benefit from other networks that are taking place around the whole business industry.
Yeah, it's so important, those set pieces, aren't they, for just shifting your thinking, getting you out of your habits. Like you said, your own experience, and suddenly you start trying this or that, and you open up a whole new world. And I think, you know, it's a fantastic initiative. And I know from our perspective at the chamber, it's the positivity around it. It's, you know, being something you can really sort of get behind and just give another platform for great, you know, businesses who are you know, fighting at the moment for survival. We know that across the board, and it feels that, you know, ways we can establish better links. And we sort of talked about the resilience and I suppose the self-reliance of a lot of
just a little bit of feedback from the community at a grassroots level. They genuinely appreciated the chamber and also the council giving that level of endorsement, because it moved it from away from just a community initiative into actually mainstream institutions were recognising and supporting the community.
Yeah. Well, you know, and the council's sort of approach, and certainly the chamber's view, is we're here for business and any and all businesses, and you know, that's been true throughout our history, but certainly something that we're really trying to push now. And I should say that anyone who's watching who wants to find out more, then certainly online, Black Pound Day is the way to go about it, and you can sort of participate yourself, and also obviously find out ways to support through that. So if you are watching and want to do that, please do. And then Joel, just turning to yourself, and I know we were talking yesterday at the Commonwealth Chamber AGM about, you know, your sort of approach and attitude in general to that role and to the importance of the Commonwealth Chamber, and also sort of inclusivity and having an inclusive approach to doing business. But you wear many hats and have done throughout your career, and I suppose, you know, both your own experiences as an entrepreneur and just developing and achieving the sort of the success and status that you have, and then also mentoring an awful lot of business folk. I mean, what do you think are the specific challenges that Black-owned businesses face over and above the many challenges that just business in general is facing right now?
Well, thank you, Paul, and I think for me, this is not a new story in terms of the power of Black businesses and the contribution that they make, but it's a story that's not often told enough. But clearly you've heard from Munda in terms of his experience and knowledge and stats and actual evidence of contribution. Obviously you've heard from Sharon in terms of the strategic importance and the added value that businesses bring both to society and overall. But I think some of the overarching challenges have always been there in terms of access to finance for many Black-owned businesses, in terms of the actual mainstream services and support services, understanding and having the cultural intelligence about Black-owned businesses. And I think, you know, there's also a level of ignorance, if I'll be honest, in terms of many organizations hearing the word Black and almost having a dismissive or a negative view on Black businesses in that context. And so for me, inclusion is not about the political view of it. It's about the reality that if we're not inclusive in the way that we work collectively, we are not all going to benefit from the power of inclusion. And Black businesses are a huge part of that here in our region and abroad. And for me, from an entrepreneurial point of view, if you look at the resilience that's built into the DNA of the Black businesses and Black culture, and I'm not dismissing any other culture at all, but if you look at the Black businesses themselves, if you look at the history of Black businesses, if you look at Black Wall Street in the 1920s in the US, there's already been historic evidence of economy and structure and scale of Black-owned businesses in a way that adds value to an economy. So this is not a new conversation. So I think part of the challenge moving forward is making sure that there's a level of education that is integrated at all levels of support, from grassroots right through to institution, right up to government, and an adoption of that cultural intelligence to make sure that the potential of Black businesses is being utilised in the most effective way.
Because I know that's something that we hear an awful lot here at the Chamber is, you know, businesses just want a level playing field, don't they? They just want it to be fair, and it's kind of give me the fair chance to trade, and then we'll get out there and let the market sort of dictate. But it's about fairness, isn't it? And I suppose that's where and Sharon, you mentioned sort of leveling the playing field, and there's clearly continues to be work to do. I mean, Joel, have you, Monda touched on the changes or some of the positive steps, I guess, in the last 10 years. We talked about, maybe that coming out of the last financial crash. I mean, have you seen that, felt that? Is there a positive trajectory? It's not to say there isn't an awful lot more to do. We wouldn't be having the conversation today if that wasn't the case. But what's your take on how things have been changing and how much more needs to be done, would you say?
Well, absolutely. I mean, putting all those challenges to one side, there is such a level of positivity and unity when it comes to Black businesses and Black entrepreneurs, because there's a sense of achievement when you put that work in, and that inbuilt resilience in DNA makes us more susceptible to entrepreneurship anyway. And so there's been a real positive drive for giving back, for creating legacy, for self-sufficiency. But that also has to be balanced with a sense of growth mindset. And, Sharon mentioned that 17-year-old who started their business. We have to work with our young people at the youngest age possible to help them to develop that growth mindset, because life is hard enough, let alone wanting to start your own business, let alone making it a sustainable one. All of us could pick up a mobile phone, a laptop, and be started in business within the next half an hour.
Yeah.
But will you be here 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years from now? And it's that scale of mindset and scale of support along that way that's going to be so important.
And that's certainly the links between business and education and why that's so critical as well, isn't it? And it's a topic which comes up a lot with the Chamber. And I always think there's a lot of willingness on behalf of business, but sometimes making those connections effectively can be quite challenging. But,
And it has to be a level of honesty about each phase as well. If you're a startup, have you got a validated need? Is there an actual customer that actually wants what you have to offer? Otherwise, it just becomes a very expensive hobby, and none of us have time for that. No. So, there has to be a level of reality about the journey, but certainly within the Black community, there is a sense of empowerment, and obviously recent events globally and its effect here has reignited that flame for the Black community. But this is about Black economics and self-sufficiency as well, and it starts at grassroots with the right support in a fair and equitable way so that we all can benefit in the long term.
And Joel, just tell us a little bit about the Commonwealth Legacy Programme that I know that you've been so, the mastermind behind, I guess, and working closely with the LEP, with the Chamber. I know Jamila Davis, who Sharon mentioned as well, has played a key part from the Chamber side of that. But just give us a sense of what that's been about and the opportunities that aims to provide.
Well, one of the things about having great ideas as a business is that the ambition is there, but not always the capability and the capacity to scale, to grow, to bring that to fruition. So that program is essentially a 6-month program working with a range of partners across the region, including CREM, Aston University, obviously yourselves, the LEP Legacy Centre. We've just brought on board HS2 and a couple of the corporate partners to follow. So it's starting to get that swell now in terms of saying, well, let's invest time and resource into ethnic minority-owned businesses and allow them to turn the social value they create into commercial value and give them the tools, the insight, the expertise, the networks to be able to bring their products or services to the fore, both here and abroad. So it's focused primarily on helping them to be better equipped to apply for procured contracts, Commonwealth Games opportunities where they have the profile to meet that, but also right across the Commonwealth, be able to look at how they can leverage their own diaspora to drive international trade opportunities as well.
Fantastic.
It's a real collective integrated program.
And Joe, I'm glad you mentioned the Commonwealth Games there. That's a really nice segue into a question I wanted to throw open to all of the panel, and maybe start with Sharon or Monda. I mean, how important is the Commonwealth Games to the Birmingham economy? And I suppose by the nature of the fact it's the Commonwealth Games, how important is it to the sort of the BAME business community as a that sort of one-off catalyst. You know, we're not going to get the Commonwealth Games here again in our lifetimes, probably, are we? So it feels like, wow, this is so special. But yeah, what's your take on that? So
if you strip out kind of the kind of political view on what the games will bring and really look at it in its bare bones, what we've got are diverse communities from across the world all being congregated in our region, where we have what Manda alluded to as super diversity. So we've got the diasporas across the world connected in one place in our city. The trade-off of that, in its truest sense, is that you've got to have ideas, you've got to have networks, you've got to have opportunity, and you've got to have over 1 billion people's eyeballs looking at all of that at one time. So if business is not part of the Commonwealth Games, we as a region have missed a trick, quite frankly. And the games itself is a intervention point, because there's work to do pre the games, during the games, and making sure there's a sustainable legacy post the games. So we can't, as a region, get wrapped up in the games itself. We have to look at the full ecosystem around it. And from a business point of view, we have to make sure we're at the table to offer guidance, but also to genuinely leverage that in a positive way to give benefit back to the region and beyond. Because if we as a region can harness that, we can then almost re-manifest that back through the diaspora. So we can re-contribute back to the global economy.
Yeah.
So it's not just the 11, 12 days of the games, it's a whole opportunity to really change that narrative and to really develop a new legacy for this city. And finally, put a flag in the sand to say, this is the region to do business, because we are inclusive, we walk it, we talk it, but we also know that where we have gaps, we are willing to work together to solve them. And until we are connected to do that at all levels, we're going to miss this opportunity.
I think you've nailed it there, Joel. But I mean, Manda, Sharon, what's your take on the game? And it is that sense that if people don't appreciate just what an opportunity this is, then we're collectively failing, aren't they? Because it really is wonderful that we've got this coming here. We've now got to make the most of it. But yeah, what's your views?
Trying to be polite and see who's going first.
Go on, Sharon, after you.
Yeah, after you, Sharon.
I think when it comes to the Commonwealth Games, I think we have to, the games are fantastic, but as Joel said, we cannot get wrapped up solely in 11 days of sport. We should be thinking at the moment, what does legacy actually look like, and what does that look like for the business community? There are so many different diasporas across the city, and we need to be making sure that the infrastructure of the game is an enabler to let those businesses grow and develop and be able to trade. We should be thinking about the international trade links that are involved also, because there's going to be a huge amount of, you know, cross-international work that takes place over the coming 2 years. We need to look at what does that look like in the future, and how do we maintain those relationships and those links, because, you know, once the games is over, they all move on and they go to the next games. So we need to see what we can harness at the moment. It is the biggest marketing opportunity for this city, as the whole world will be all eyes on Birmingham. So we need to be putting our best foot forward and marketing it well. But I think for those, this is where you're going to see innovation take place, and people are going to start thinking about, what can I do in the lead up to the games? I want to be involved. I want to do something. So I think programs like the one that Joel's talked about is going to be essential in making sure that businesses are ready for when that opportunity comes up. But I also think we really need to be really strategic in our thinking about what we want the economy to look like moving forward. We're going through COVID at the moment, and after this, business is not going to be the same as usual in the broader context. So we need to redesign what we want to do, how we want to look, how our business are going to be mobilised more so, and we need to take that into the games with us, and how that's going to be, how we're going to capitalise post-games. But there's lots of international opportunities for different diasporas to literally not just show their products, but actually really put their culture on display. And those that sell and, you know, are trading in cultural things, I think it's a great opportunity for them as well. So it's more than 11 days of sport.
Oh, so much more, isn't it? I totally agree.
No,
Manda, what's your view?
I agree with the sentiments of both Joel and Sharon. I'll just make a couple of other points. It has the potential to be transformational in the way that it was for Manchester. For Manchester, it really opened up a huge amount of regeneration and a huge amount of change, economic change. And it was at that catalyst, because I think everyone at that time was seized of the importance of it in that sense, and they had that strategic vision. I just hope that we have that too, and that's really important. Joel and Sharon have talked about the importance of investing in physical infrastructure. Everyone agrees with that. I think there should be equal attention paid to social infrastructure. You know, the people, investing in people around it, and that includes business. One thing I'm really concerned about is, you know, everyone on this call realizes the transformational potential of the games. Everyone on the call is invested in Birmingham at every single level. We need to ensure that where the decisions are made, the people who are actually working on this project, the large organizations that are doing the heavy lifting, are equally seized of the importance, transformational potential, are equally invested in this city, not simply for the purposes of expediting a contract, but here for the long term. Because as Sharon says, this is a huge marketing opportunity, but a lot of marketing is hype as well. So we need to be convinced that there are roots in this city, and those roots are the people. And if we don't invest in the people, if we don't build an economic a set of economic relationships that support our businesses, then I think we're going to sort of miss a great opportunity.
I think that's a brilliant point, Mondo. It absolutely sort of resonates with me. You know, we can't have the games done to us, can we? Yeah. Birmingham's on the T-shirt. We need to own it. And you know, probably again, I'm sure people watching as well will feel the same. You know, that you know, we live here, we work here. This is our home. We need to sort of get our elbows out if needed to make sure that legacy is lasting. And you know, we've got a responsibility as well, haven't we? Both to sort of be involved and also to ensure that happens. Because what you just outlined there, Mondo, for me, it's not an option, is it? I know one thing that we've done at the Chamber, which actually really articulates what you said, is we produced a business manifesto, which was same thing, saying we've got to make sure this has lasting impact. You know, in Glasgow, I think the games, a bit like Manchester, was transformational back in 2014. 2018 in the Gold Coast, we spoke to counterparts over there, less so. It really was sort of felt like that sort of, you know, spaceship comes, lands, 2 weeks of sport, goes again. And actually, local businesses were saying that it had a detrimental effect. And for me, it feels like there's only one option for us. It's got to be the former. It's got to be positive, or it will be a sense of it's not what it's about.
Paul, we're working at the moment with 12 young black creatives, and we're trying to sort of support them as businesses, support their creativity. It's remarkable how many have a commitment to this city. You know, it's not just about plying their trade. They want to give something back. And these are young, black, talented individuals. And I think there's so much energy, there's so much built on. That's the best of Birmingham, right? And that we need to showcase that. And that's why, you know, the Chamber leading something like this has a huge symbolic importance, because I think that the ideal position is, you know, what we sort of define, what we mean by ecosystem has to naturally include young creatives like that, because that is what Birmingham is about, and will become even more so.
Strikes me, we've got to do it, you know, top down and bottom up, and that way you can create something which is really strong. Well, we're already actually almost out of time, which is remarkable because it's flown by. And there are some questions which people have popped into the chat, so I'm going to just quickly try to summarize, and then I'll come back to all of the panelists, and maybe just if you could give a thought on some of the questions, and also just a wrap up. There was one here it's not a name, but someone said that they've set up a not-for-profit company during the pandemic to help assist the most vulnerable in our communities. I think they're from the Black country, but how can they get more involved? Well, first of all, thank you and well done for doing that. And I think that certainly from, the chamber, the council's perspective, reach out. There's lots of ways to get involved and to participate. And then there's a couple of questions. Well, Matteo has popped a couple in here, just talking about what's the role of the BAME businesses in the local economy, given their tendency to export, and can local SMEs support inclusive growth through a bottom-up approach, or is the role of public institutions critical as well? Which I suppose is what we were just sort of talking about. You really need both. And then finally, CJ has just, thank you, said this is an amazing and progressive conversation. Do we think there might need to be an event that brings together all of the initiatives that are seeking to support Black businesses at a micro level to help get them ready, which is a really great question there. So yeah, just move around the screen. I don't know, Joel or Sharon, do you want to sort of go first? Just some quick thoughts, and we'll go on, Joel.
I think it's just really important just to clarify that when we're talking about BAME, the clues in the actual acronym, it's Black and Ethnic Minority owned businesses, and every community has their own challenges. So we have to just be careful of not grouping all communities together, but we need to have a fair and equitable view on all communities together. And so by having that direct individual understanding of different communities, we can then see the similarities within, then we can start driving forward as one. But we just need to be careful, especially as we get into the games and beyond, that we don't group all communities together in every conversation, but where there is relevance, that we do that in the right, effective way.
So really comes back to your point on cultural intelligence, doesn't it, and education?
100%, yeah. So just wanted to clarify that.
Thanks, Joel. Sharon, any sort of closing thoughts from yourself, and maybe just reflections on some of those questions that have been popped in the chat there?
I think this has been a really progressive conversation, and I think it's so great for putting it on. There was something that you said, Paul, when you said the business manifesto, and I think that for the Commonwealth Games, and I think what we do need to also get into the habit of doing is actually turning those initiatives that we had at the beginning, or the thoughts around the manifesto, and actually starting to track them to make sure that we are on track with some of the things that we're talking about, and going into communities, different communities, because as Joel says, we all have different challenges, and actually from their viewpoint, are we in the right space, or what is it that we need to do? So I think we need to open up that conversation, because we want businesses from all communities to actually own the games and feel like they are a part of the journey and be able to flourish as businesses. So that's almost my call to action that you didn't know I was going to throw in, but I just did. But I think it's really important.
Yeah.
And I think we need to continue this conversation. Actually, I'm really keen to speak to Monda as well about some of his views. But the games will only be as good as the people of Birmingham, and we all have to own it and bring forward our ideas. Yeah. The bottom-up approach, I think the Black Pound Day is a demonstration of one type of positive action that's come from the bottom up and has really grabbed the mind of the institutions, and we need more people to come forward if they have got initiatives. No idea is a bad idea. It's just, it might need amending.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree, Sharon. And this is our home. We're going to be here not just in 2022 when the games take place, but sort of God willing in 2023, 2024, 2025 and beyond. And so you're right. We've got to do this, haven't we? We can't sit by and watch. We've got to make sure that things happen. And Monda, you opened up the panel, so it seems fitting. Then nice symmetry for you to close with final thoughts.
Well, I think Birmingham is the best place I can think of for all communities to flourish. And I think these bottom-up initiatives that the Black Pound Day exemplifies is a brilliant example of that happening. We need to build more spaces where we can have this conversation. That's why, just saying it's great that Chamber are hosting this. I would like to see every mainstream institution have routinized, normalized this kind of conversation. because I think that means it's being taken seriously where important decisions get made. There is no shortage of advocates for this agenda. What there is sort of what we need to do is move to the next step where it becomes an integral part of every institution and every individual in this city.
Yeah, and as you say, it's very much a starting point, isn't it? And we will continue the conversation. We'll continue that offline, but also in the public sphere, and sort of keep driving forward. And the positivity, the sort of sense of opportunity that's resonated across the chat today is great. And I mean, Sharon sort of said we're in the middle of a pandemic right now, so where you can find that, you've got to really nurture it and really take it seriously, and that's on all of us right now to keep doing so. But thank you to everyone for tuning in and for watching. Thank you to the panel, to Monda, to Sharon and Joel for an early start, a really lively and engaging conversation. It's the beginning. Let's keep on going. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.